Question 1. The analysis reveals that a real estate broker in Quebec is considering using a new AI-powered platform that automates property valuations and generates personalized marketing materials for listings. This platform requires access to extensive client data, including personal contact information, financial details, and property specifics. The broker is eager to leverage this technology for efficiency and competitive advantage. What is the most ethically and legally sound approach for the broker to adopt in Quebec when integrating this new technology into their practice? Option A. Proceed with using the AI platform for all clients, assuming that by engaging their services, clients implicitly consent to the use of their data for marketing and valuation purposes. Option B. Utilize the AI platform for property valuations, but manually create all marketing materials to avoid sharing sensitive client data with third-party technology providers. Option C. Obtain explicit, informed consent from each client before using their data on the AI platform, clearly explaining how their information will be used, stored, and protected, and ensuring the platform complies with Quebec's privacy laws. Option D. Rely entirely on the AI platform's automated outputs for both valuations and marketing, minimizing personal client interaction to streamline the process and reduce potential errors. Correct answer is C. Obtain explicit, informed consent from each client before using their data on the AI platform, clearly explaining how their information will be used, stored, and protected, and ensuring the platform complies with Quebec's privacy laws. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario that is professionally challenging due to the rapid evolution of technology and its integration into real estate transactions in Quebec. Brokers must navigate the ethical and legal implications of using new digital tools while upholding their fiduciary duties to clients and adhering to the strict regulations governing real estate practice in Quebec, particularly those enforced by the Organisme d'autoréglementation du Cordage Immobilier du Québec, OSIC. The core challenge lies in balancing the efficiency and reach offered by technology with the imperative of maintaining client confidentiality, ensuring data security, and providing competent, transparent service. The correct approach involves a proactive and informed adoption of technology, prioritizing client consent and data protection. This means clearly communicating to clients how their personal information will be used, stored, and protected when utilizing digital platforms for marketing or transaction management. It requires brokers to stay abreast of technological advancements and their implications, ensuring that any tools employed are secure and comply with Quebec's privacy laws, such as an act respecting the protection of personal information in the private sector. Furthermore, it necessitates ensuring that technology enhances, rather than replaces, the broker's professional judgment and client interaction, maintaining a high standard of service and ethical conduct. An incorrect approach would be to implement new technologies without adequately informing clients about data usage and security measures. This failure to obtain informed consent and to implement robust data protection protocols directly contravenes privacy legislation and ethical obligations, potentially leading to breaches of confidentiality and loss of client trust. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on automated or AI-driven processes for client communication or property valuation without human oversight and professional judgment. This can lead to misinterpretations, inaccurate advice, and a diminished client experience, failing to meet the standard of care expected of a licensed real estate broker in Quebec. Finally, using unverified or insecure technological tools for managing sensitive client data exposes both the client and the broker to significant risks, including identity theft and financial fraud, and violates the broker's duty to act with diligence and integrity. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the client's needs and preferences regarding technology. This should be followed by a thorough assessment of any proposed technology security, compliance with Quebec privacy laws, and its ability to enhance service without compromising ethical standards. Continuous professional development in technological literacy and data security is crucial. Brokers must always prioritize transparency, client consent, and the protection of personal information, ensuring that technology serves as a tool to augment their professional expertise and client relationships, rather than a substitute for them. Question 2. The risk matrix shows that a group of clients in Quebec are looking to purchase a residential property together and have expressed a desire to own it jointly, with the understanding that if one owner passes away, their share will automatically pass to the surviving owner. What is the most appropriate way for a real estate broker to advise these clients regarding their ownership structure under Quebec law? Option A. Suggest they hold the property as tenants in common, explaining that each person will own a distinct, separate part of the property. Option B. Inform them that the specifics of how the property is owned upon death are a private matter between the owners and do not require detailed explanation from the broker. Option C. Advise them that they can hold the property as joint tenants and that their shares will automatically pass to the surviving owners, as this is a common understanding of joint ownership. Option D. Explain the concept of undivided co-ownership, copropriété indivise, under the Civil Code of Quebec, detailing how each co-owner holds a fraction of the property and advising them to consult a notary to formalize their co-ownership agreement, potentially including provisions for survivorship if legally permissible and desired. The correct answer is D. Explain the concept of undivided co-ownership, copropriété indivise, under the Civil Code of Quebec, detailing how each co-owner holds a fraction of the property and advising them to consult a notary to formalize their co-ownership agreement, potentially including provisions for survivorship if legally permissible and desired. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the broker to navigate the complexities of property ownership types and their implications for client advice, particularly when dealing with multiple individuals acquiring property together. Misunderstanding or misrepresenting these ownership types can lead to significant legal disputes, financial losses for clients, and damage to the broker's professional reputation and license. Careful judgment is required to ensure clients fully understand their rights, responsibilities, and the implications of their chosen ownership structure under Quebec law. The best professional approach involves clearly explaining the distinctions between joint tenancy and tenancy in common, emphasizing the right of survivorship inherent in joint tenancy and the separate, undivided interests of tenants in common. This approach is correct because it directly addresses the client's stated intention of owning the property together, while ensuring they understand the legal ramifications of each ownership type as defined by Quebec civil law. Specifically, the broker must highlight that under Quebec Civil Code, while joint ownership is possible, the concept of joint tenancy, with its automatic right of survivorship as understood in common law jurisdictions, is not directly equivalent. Instead, Quebec law generally favors undivided co-ownership, copropriété indivise, where each co-owner has a right to a fraction of the property and can sell or bequeath their share independently, unless a specific agreement, like a declaration of co-ownership, dictates otherwise. The broker's duty is to explain these nuances accurately, ensuring the clients make an informed decision aligned with Quebec's legal framework, potentially recommending they consult a notary for formalizing their co-ownership agreement. An incorrect approach would be to simply state that they can hold the property as joint tenants without elaborating on the Quebec legal context, implying a direct transfer of common law concepts. This is professionally unacceptable because it fails to acknowledge the specific provisions of the Civil Code of Quebec regarding co-ownership and could mislead clients into believing they have automatic survivorship rights that may not exist as they understand them, potentially leading to unintended consequences upon the death of one owner. Another incorrect approach would be to advise them to hold the property as tenants in common and explain it as each owning a distinct, separate portion of the property. This is professionally unacceptable because it misrepresents the nature of undivided co-ownership in Quebec. Tenants in common law jurisdictions hold distinct, separate shares, whereas in Quebec, co-owners generally hold an undivided right to the whole property, with their individual shares representing their proportional interest. Finally, advising them to simply figure it out amongst themselves, without providing any legal context or guidance, is professionally unacceptable. This abdicates the broker's responsibility to provide informed advice regarding property ownership structures, which is a core aspect of their professional duty. It leaves clients vulnerable to making decisions without understanding the legal implications, potentially leading to disputes and legal complications. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes client education and regulatory compliance. This involves 1. Thoroughly understanding the client's objectives. 2. Possessing a comprehensive knowledge of the relevant provincial real estate laws and ownership structures. 3. Clearly and accurately explaining these structures to clients, highlighting differences from common law concepts if applicable. 4. Advising clients to seek independent legal counsel, e.g., from a notary in Quebec for complex legal arrangements. And 5. Documenting all advice provided. Question 3. Implementation of an environmental assessment report for a property listed for sale in Quebec has revealed potential soil contamination. As the seller's real estate broker, you have reviewed the report and identified several areas of concern that, while not definitively catastrophic, suggest further investigation is warranted. What is the best course of action to uphold your professional obligations? Option A. Proceed with marketing the property as is, assuming the buyer will conduct their own due diligence and discover any issues. Option B. Advise the client to disregard the report, stating that such findings are common and unlikely to deter a motivated buyer. Option C. Inform the client that environmental reports are solely the buyer's responsibility and that your role is complete once the report is provided. Option D. Advise the client of the report's findings and recommend they engage an independent environmental consultant to conduct a more detailed assessment and provide expert recommendations. The correct answer is D. Advise the client of the report's findings and recommend they engage an independent environmental consultant to conduct a more detailed assessment and provide expert recommendations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a real estate broker in Quebec because it requires navigating the intersection of environmental due diligence and client representation. The broker must balance their fiduciary duty to the client with the legal and ethical obligations to disclose material facts, including potential environmental concerns that could impact property value and marketability. Failure to adequately address environmental issues can lead to legal repercussions, reputational damage, and a breach of professional conduct. The broker's judgment is critical in determining the extent of investigation and disclosure necessary to protect both the client's interests and the integrity of the transaction. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves proactively advising the client on the potential implications of the environmental report and recommending further professional assessment. This approach correctly prioritizes informed consent and due diligence. By suggesting the client engage an environmental consultant, the broker ensures that the client receives expert advice tailored to the specific findings of the report. This aligns with the broker's ethical duty to act in the client's best interest by facilitating a thorough understanding of all material aspects of the property. Furthermore, it demonstrates compliance with the Quebec Professional Code of Conduct for Real Estate Brokers, which mandates acting with integrity and competence, and ensuring clients are fully informed about factors affecting their decisions. Incorrect approach is analysis. Proceeding with the transaction without further discussion or recommendation, assuming the report's findings are minor, is professionally unacceptable. This approach neglects the broker's duty to ensure the client is fully informed about potential material facts that could affect the property's value or future use. The broker is not qualified to make a definitive judgment on the significance of environmental findings, and this inaction could lead to undisclosed liabilities for the client. Recommending the client simply ignore the report and proceed with the sale, believing it will not affect the buyer's decision, is a severe ethical and professional failure. This directly contradicts the broker's fiduciary duty and the obligation to disclose material facts. It actively attempts to mislead the client and potentially the buyer, exposing the broker to significant legal and disciplinary action. Suggesting that the environmental report is solely the buyer's responsibility to investigate, and therefore the seller's broker need not be concerned, is also professionally unsound. While buyers conduct their own due diligence, the seller's broker has a duty to disclose known material facts about the property, including any environmental reports obtained by the seller that indicate potential issues. Shifting all responsibility without ensuring the client understands the implications of the report is a dereliction of duty. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Quebec's real estate sector should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential material facts that could impact a property's value or desirability. This involves recognizing that environmental reports, even if seemingly minor, can constitute such facts. The next step is to communicate these potential issues to the client clearly and transparently, explaining the implications without offering unqualified opinions. The professional should then recommend seeking expert advice from qualified professionals, e.g., environmental consultants, legal counsel, to fully assess the situation. This ensures the client makes informed decisions based on comprehensive information, thereby fulfilling the broker's ethical and legal obligations. Question 4. To address the challenge of accurately valuing a residential property in Quebec for a seller who is eager to achieve the highest possible sale price, while also ensuring a fair and transparent transaction for potential buyers, which property valuation method should a real estate broker prioritize and why? Option A. The cost approach, by estimating the cost to rebuild the property and subtracting for depreciation, thereby determining its replacement value. Option B. The income approach, by calculating the potential rental income the property could generate and capitalizing that income to arrive at a value. Option C. A comparative market analysis, by examining recent sales of similar properties, current listings, and expired listings in the immediate vicinity to determine a realistic market value. Option D. A subjective assessment based on the seller's stated desired price, without extensive market research. The correct answer is C. A comparative market analysis, by examining recent sales of similar properties, current listings, and expired listings in the immediate vicinity to determine a realistic market value. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the real estate broker must navigate conflicting pressures: the seller's desire for a high price, the buyer's need for a fair assessment, and the broker's ethical and legal obligation to provide an accurate and unbiased valuation. The broker's license and reputation are at stake, as is the integrity of the real estate transaction. A broker must act with diligence and honesty, as mandated by the Quebec Real Estate Brokerage Act, Loi sur le courtage immobilier, and its associated regulations, which require brokers to act in the best interest of their clients while upholding professional standards. The most appropriate approach in this situation is to conduct a thorough comparative market analysis, CMA. This method involves identifying properties similar to the subject property that have recently sold, are currently listed, or have expired from the market. By analyzing the features, location, condition, and recent sales prices of these comparable properties, the broker can establish a range of market value for the subject property. This approach is grounded in the principle of substitution, where a buyer will not pay more for property than it would cost to acquire a similar property of equal desirability and utility. The Quebec Real Estate Brokerage Act emphasizes the broker's duty to provide accurate information and advice to clients, and a CMA, when performed diligently, offers the most reliable reflection of current market conditions and buyer behavior, thereby fulfilling the broker's fiduciary duties. Using the income approach would be inappropriate and potentially misleading in this context. While the income approach is valuable for income-generating properties like rental units, it is not the primary method for valuing a single-family residence, where the primary benefit to the owner is occupancy and potential appreciation, not rental income. Applying it here would misrepresent the property's true market value based on its intended use and the expectations of typical buyers in the residential market. This could lead to an inflated or deflated price, violating the broker's duty of honesty and diligence. Similarly, relying solely on the cost approach would be professionally unsound. The cost approach estimates the cost to replace the property with a new one, minus depreciation. While useful for unique properties or insurance purposes, it often fails to account for market demand, location desirability, and the economic obsolescence that can significantly impact a property's actual selling price. For a standard residential property, this method can produce a valuation that is disconnected from what a willing buyer would actually pay, thereby failing to provide a realistic market assessment and potentially breaching the broker's obligation to provide competent service. The professional reasoning process should involve prioritizing the client's best interest through accurate and objective valuation. This means selecting the valuation method that best reflects the property's market and intended use. A broker should always start with the most relevant method, which for a residential property is typically the comparative market analysis. If other methods are considered, they should be used to corroborate or refine the CMA, not to override it based on external pressures or personal bias. Transparency with the client about the chosen methodology and its limitations is also crucial. Question 5. Examination of the data shows that a client in Quebec is eager to purchase a property, but has expressed concerns about their existing credit card debt and a recent personal loan impacting their ability to secure a mortgage. As their real estate broker, what is the most appropriate course of action to ethically and legally guide them through the mortgage application process? Option A. Suggest the client seek a mortgage from a lender known for more lenient approval criteria, without emphasizing the need for full disclosure of all debts. Option B. Advise the client to be completely truthful about all their debts on the mortgage application, and suggest they consult with a mortgage broker or financial advisor to explore their financing options. Option C. Recommend that the client omit the details of their personal loan from the mortgage application to improve their chances of approval. Option D. Proceed with the mortgage application as is, without discussing the client's debt concerns further, assuming the lender will conduct their own assessment. Correct answer is B. Advise the client to be completely truthful about all their debts on the mortgage application, and suggest they consult with a mortgage broker or financial advisor to explore their financing options. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the real estate broker to navigate a situation where a client's financial circumstances may impact their ability to secure a mortgage, potentially affecting the sale. The broker must balance their duty to their client with the legal and ethical obligations related to mortgage applications. Careful judgment is required to ensure transparency, honesty, and adherence to the regulatory framework governing real estate transactions in Quebec. The best professional approach involves proactively and transparently communicating the potential challenges to the client. This means advising the client to be completely honest on the mortgage application regarding their financial situation, including any outstanding debts or credit issues, and to seek professional advice from a mortgage broker or financial advisor. This approach aligns with the ethical duty of a real estate broker in Quebec to act with integrity and to ensure clients are fully informed. It also respects the legal requirements of mortgage applications, which mandate truthful disclosure of all relevant financial information. By encouraging honesty and professional consultation, the broker facilitates a realistic assessment of the client's mortgage eligibility, protecting both the client and the integrity of the transaction. An incorrect approach would be to advise the client to omit or downplay their existing debts on the mortgage application. This is a direct violation of the ethical obligation to act with honesty and integrity. Furthermore, it contravenes the legal requirement for full and truthful disclosure on mortgage applications, which can lead to severe penalties for both the applicant and anyone who knowingly facilitates such misrepresentation. Such an action erodes trust and can result in the mortgage being denied, legal repercussions, and damage to the broker's reputation and license. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the client's concerns about their debts and proceed with the mortgage application without addressing the issue. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to act in the client's best interest. The broker has a responsibility to ensure the client understands the implications of their financial situation on their ability to obtain financing. Failing to do so could lead to a failed transaction and client dissatisfaction, and potentially expose the broker to liability for not providing adequate guidance. Finally, advising the client to seek a mortgage from a lender known for less stringent lending practices without full disclosure of their financial situation is also professionally unacceptable. While the intention might be to help the client secure financing, this approach encourages circumventing proper due diligence and potentially exposes the client to predatory lending or unaffordable loan terms. It also fails to uphold the broker's duty to ensure the client is making informed decisions based on accurate financial assessments. Professionals should approach such situations by prioritizing open communication, ethical conduct, and adherence to all applicable laws and regulations. This involves understanding the client's needs, assessing potential obstacles, and guiding them towards legitimate and informed solutions, often by recommending consultation with other qualified professionals. Question 6. Research into client financial situations in Quebec reveals a potential buyer who is very concerned about their initial monthly housing expenses and is seeking the lowest possible payment in the short term. As a real estate broker, how should you best advise this client regarding their mortgage options, specifically concerning fixed rate, adjustable rate, and interest-only mortgages? Option A. Suggest an interest-only mortgage, focusing on the immediate reduction in monthly payments, without a detailed discussion of the client's long-term principal repayment strategy and financial capacity. Option B. Thoroughly explain the differences between fixed-rate, adjustable rate, and interest-only mortgages, detailing their respective risks and benefits, and guide the client to consider their personal financial situation, risk tolerance, and long-term goals to make an informed decision. Option C. Advise a fixed-rate mortgage as the most secure option, without exploring whether its potentially higher initial payments might cause undue financial strain, or if other options might better suit the client's immediate cash flow needs. Option D. Recommend an adjustable-rate mortgage, emphasizing its lower initial payments, without extensively discussing the potential for future payment increases due to market fluctuations. The correct answer is B. Thoroughly explain the differences between fixed-rate, adjustable-rate, and interest-only mortgages, detailing their respective risks and benefits, and guide the client to consider their personal financial situation, risk tolerance, and long-term goals to make an informed decision. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker in Quebec to balance the client's immediate financial concerns with the long-term implications of mortgage choices. The client's desire for lower initial payments, while understandable, could lead to future financial strain if not properly understood. A broker must act in the client's best interest, which involves providing comprehensive advice that considers risk, stability, and the client's overall financial well-being, not just their current cash flow. This necessitates a deep understanding of different mortgage types and their suitability for various client profiles. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves thoroughly explaining the fundamental differences between fixed-rate, adjustable-rate, and interest-only mortgages, focusing on their respective risks and benefits in the Quebec context. This includes detailing how interest rate fluctuations impact payments on adjustable-rate mortgages, the long-term predictability of fixed-rate mortgages, and the principal repayment structure, or lack thereof, for interest-only loans. The broker must then guide the client to consider their personal financial situation, risk tolerance, and long-term goals to make an informed decision. This approach aligns with the ethical obligation under Quebec's real estate regulations to provide accurate, complete, and unbiased information to clients, ensuring they understand the products they are engaging with and can make decisions that serve their best interests. Incorrect approach is analysis. Recommending an adjustable-rate mortgage solely based on the client's desire for lower initial payments, without a detailed discussion of the potential for payment increases due to market fluctuations, is professionally unacceptable. It fails to adequately inform the client of the inherent risks and could lead to future financial hardship, violating the duty of care. Similarly, suggesting an interest-only mortgage without a clear understanding of the client's long-term repayment strategy and financial capacity to manage the principal repayment later is irresponsible. This approach neglects the fundamental principle of ensuring the client can afford the full cost of the property over time. Finally, pushing a fixed-rate mortgage without exploring if it aligns with the client's financial flexibility needs or if the initial higher payments would cause undue hardship also falls short. While a fixed rate offers stability, it may not be the optimal choice for every client, and failing to explore alternatives demonstrates a lack of personalized advice. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a client-centric decision-making framework. This involves actively listening to the client's stated needs and concerns, then layering that with expert knowledge of available financial products and their implications. The process should include 1. Needs assessment, understanding the client's financial situation, risk tolerance, and future plans. 2. Product education, clearly explaining the features, benefits, and risks of relevant mortgage types, fixed rate, adjustable rate, interest only, within the Quebec regulatory landscape. 3. Risk mitigation discussion, highlighting potential downsides of each option and how they might affect the client. 4. Collaborative decision-making, guiding the client to a choice that best aligns with their assessed needs and risk profile, ensuring they are fully informed and comfortable with the decision. Question 7. Given the current economic climate and recent fluctuations in the Quebec real estate market, which approach would be most appropriate for a real estate broker advising a client who is experiencing financial pressure and considering selling their property quickly? Option A. Advise the client to sell immediately to capitalize on any perceived short-term upward price momentum, downplaying potential market downturns to secure a quick sale. Option B. Recommend selling based on recent anecdotal evidence of quick sales in the neighborhood, without a formal market analysis or consideration of the client's long-term financial goals. Option C. Focus exclusively on the risks of a market downturn, urging the client to sell at any price to avoid future losses, without exploring potential strategic options. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of current and projected Quebec real estate market trends, providing the client with objective data on potential price movements, market liquidity, and financing conditions to facilitate an informed decision aligned with their financial situation and risk tolerance. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of current and projected Quebec real estate market trends, providing the client with objective data on potential price movements, market liquidity, and financing conditions to facilitate an informed decision aligned with their financial situation and risk tolerance. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker in Quebec to navigate the complexities of market cycles and their impact on client decisions, while upholding their fiduciary duties and adhering to the ethical standards set by the Organisme d'Autoréglementation du Cordage Immobilier du Québec, OSIC. The broker must balance providing informed advice with avoiding any actions that could be construed as market manipulation or misrepresentation, especially when a client is experiencing financial distress. Careful judgment is required to ensure the client's best interests are served within the legal and ethical framework. The best approach involves a thorough, objective analysis of current and projected market conditions in Quebec, supported by credible data and expert opinions, to inform the client about potential risks and opportunities. This approach aligns with the broker's duty to act with diligence and honesty, as stipulated by the Civil Code of Quebec and OSIC regulations. By presenting a balanced view of the market cycle, including potential downturns and upturns, the broker empowers the client to make an informed decision based on their individual financial situation and risk tolerance, rather than succumbing to immediate emotional pressures or speculative optimism. This upholds the principle of client-centered advice and avoids any appearance of undue influence. An approach that focuses solely on the potential for immediate price appreciation, ignoring the broader market cycle and the client's financial vulnerability, is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to the client making a decision that is not in their long-term best interest, potentially violating their fiduciary duty. Similarly, an approach that emphasizes only the risks of a market downturn without presenting potential opportunities for strategic investment or negotiation would also be incomplete and potentially detrimental. Furthermore, advising the client to make a decision based on anecdotal evidence or personal speculation, rather than objective market analysis, breaches the professional standard of care and the OSIC ethical guidelines regarding competence and integrity. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes objective data analysis, client needs assessment, and ethical considerations. This involves understanding the current phase of the real estate cycle in Quebec, considering its implications for property values, market liquidity, and financing conditions. The broker must then assess the client's financial capacity, risk appetite, and personal objectives. Finally, the broker must communicate this information clearly and transparently, enabling the client to make a well-informed decision that aligns with their circumstances and the prevailing market realities, always acting in good faith and in the client's best interest. Question 8. The efficiency study reveals that a residential property listed by a Quebec real estate broker has a known, significant foundation issue that was disclosed by the seller. The buyer's broker has not yet inquired about the property's structural integrity. What is the most appropriate course of action for the listing broker to ensure compliance with Quebec's real estate laws and ethical standards? Option A. Inform the buyer's broker about the foundation issue, but minimize its potential impact to facilitate the sale. Option B. Wait for the buyer's broker to specifically ask about the foundation before disclosing the issue. Option C. Proactively inform the buyer's broker about the known foundation issue, providing all relevant details. Option D. Disclose the foundation issue only to the seller and assume the buyer's broker will discover it through their own due diligence. The correct answer is C. Proactively inform the buyer's broker about the known foundation issue, providing all relevant details. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a common challenge in real estate transactions, ensuring all parties are fully informed and that the broker acts with integrity. This scenario is professionally challenging because it pits the broker's duty to their client against the potential for a quicker, albeit less transparent, sale. Careful judgment is required to navigate the ethical and legal obligations under Quebec's real estate laws, particularly the Civil Code of Quebec and the regulations governing real estate brokers. The best approach involves proactively disclosing all known material facts to the buyer's broker, even if they are not explicitly requested. This aligns with the broker's fundamental duty of loyalty and good faith towards their client, as well as the broader obligation to act honestly and diligently. Quebec law emphasizes transparency and the disclosure of information that could influence a buyer's decision. By providing this information upfront, the broker upholds their professional integrity, minimizes the risk of future disputes, and ensures the transaction proceeds on a sound and informed basis, respecting the principles of fair dealing. An approach that involves waiting for a direct question about the foundation issues before disclosing is professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a breach of the broker's duty to disclose material facts, which are defined as facts that could reasonably influence a party's decision to enter into a contract or the terms of that contract. Withholding such information, even if not directly asked, can be interpreted as a misrepresentation or omission, violating the broker's ethical obligations and potentially leading to legal repercussions under Quebec's consumer protection laws and real estate brokerage regulations. Another unacceptable approach is to only disclose the foundation issues to the seller and not to the buyer's broker. This creates an information asymmetry that is detrimental to the buyer and undermines the principle of fair dealing. The broker's duty extends to ensuring the buyer is adequately informed through their representative, and deliberately withholding information from the buyer's side, even if the seller is aware, is a serious ethical lapse. Finally, an approach that suggests downplaying the significance of the foundation issues to the buyer's broker is also professionally unacceptable. This constitutes a form of misrepresentation, as it involves providing incomplete or misleading information. The broker's obligation is to present facts accurately and without embellishment or minimization, allowing the buyer to make their own assessment of the risks involved. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, honesty, and the client's best interests, always in accordance with Quebec's legal and ethical standards. This involves a proactive approach to disclosure, anticipating what information a reasonable buyer would want to know, and acting with diligence and good faith throughout the transaction. Question 9. System analysis indicates that a real estate broker in Quebec is advising an investor client interested in acquiring a commercial property. The client is exploring financing options beyond traditional bank mortgages and has inquired about hard money loans and seller financing. What is the most ethically sound and regulatory compliant approach for the broker to take in this situation? Option A. Strongly advocate for hard money loans, highlighting their speed of approval as the primary advantage, and downplay the associated high interest rates and short repayment terms to expedite the client's investment. Option B. Proceed with arranging a hard money loan or seller financing without detailed client consultation, assuming the client understands the implications of these less conventional financing methods. Option C. Recommend seller financing as the easiest option, focusing on the potential for flexible terms without fully disclosing the seller's recourse options or the buyer's default consequences. Option D. Thoroughly educate the client on the nature, risks, and benefits of hard money loans and seller financing. Assess the client's financial capacity and risk tolerance, and facilitate the transaction only with the client's informed consent, ensuring full compliance with OSIC regulations and transparency in all dealings. The correct answer is D. Thoroughly educate the client on the nature, risks, and benefits of hard money loans and seller financing. Assess the client's financial capacity and risk tolerance, and facilitate the transaction only with the client's informed consent, ensuring full compliance with OSIC regulations and transparency in all dealings. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker in Quebec to navigate the complexities of alternative financing options, specifically hard money loans and seller financing, while adhering strictly to the ethical and regulatory obligations set forth by the Organisme d'autoréglementation du courtage immobilier du Québec, OSIC. The broker must ensure that any advice or facilitation provided regarding these financing methods is transparent, in the best interest of the client, and compliant with provincial laws governing real estate transactions and mortgage brokering. Missteps can lead to significant legal repercussions, financial penalties, and damage to professional reputation. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves thoroughly educating the client about the nature, risks, and benefits of hard money loans and seller financing, and then facilitating the transaction only if it aligns with the client's informed consent and financial capacity, while ensuring all OSIC regulations are met. This includes clearly disclosing all fees, terms, and potential liabilities associated with these financing methods. The broker must act as a fiduciary, prioritizing the client's interests above their own, and ensuring full transparency regarding the broker's role and any compensation received. This approach is correct because it upholds the broker's duty of loyalty and diligence, as mandated by the Quebec Real Estate Brokerage Act and OSIC Code of Ethics, ensuring clients make informed decisions based on a comprehensive understanding of the financial products. Incorrect approaches analysis. Presenting hard money loans as a universally superior or risk-free option without a thorough assessment of the client's financial situation and risk tolerance is an ethical failure. This misrepresents the high interest rates and short repayment terms often associated with hard money loans, potentially leading the client into a precarious financial situation. Such an approach violates the duty to act with prudence and diligence. Recommending seller financing without fully disclosing the potential for the seller to exercise recourse or the implications of default on the buyer's credit and property ownership is also professionally unacceptable. The broker must ensure the client understands all contractual obligations and potential consequences, as required by consumer protection laws and ethical guidelines. Facilitating a hard money loan or seller financing arrangement without ensuring all necessary documentation is in order, and that the client fully comprehends the terms and conditions, including any associated legal fees or penalties, constitutes a breach of professional duty. This lack of diligence can expose both the client and the broker to significant legal and financial risks. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a client-centric decision-making framework. This involves first understanding the client's specific financial goals, risk appetite, and overall financial health. Next, the professional must thoroughly research and understand the intricacies of any proposed financing option, including its regulatory compliance within Quebec. Transparency is paramount. All potential benefits, risks, fees, and obligations must be clearly communicated to the client in a manner they can understand. The professional must then assess whether the proposed financing aligns with the client's best interests and regulatory requirements. If the client, after being fully informed, wishes to proceed, the professional must ensure all legal and ethical obligations are met throughout the transaction. Question 10. Stakeholder feedback indicates a need for clearer guidance on investment property analysis for clients in Quebec. A broker is evaluating a commercial property for a potential investor. The property is projected to generate $75,000 in gross annual rental income. Annual operating expenses, including property taxes, insurance, maintenance, and management fees, are estimated at $25,000. The asking price for the property is $750,000. Which of the following approaches most accurately reflects a sound real estate investment analysis for this scenario? Option A. Calculate a simple return by dividing the gross annual rental income by the asking price, ignoring all operating expenses. Option B. Estimate the potential property value appreciation over the next 5 years and use this as the sole basis for the investment analysis. Option C. Focus solely on the gross annual rental income of $75,000 as the primary indicator of investment return. Option D. Calculate the net operating income (NOI) by subtracting operating expenses from gross rental income, and then determine the capitalization rate (cap rate) by dividing the NOI by the property value. The correct answer is D. Calculate the net operating income (NOI) by subtracting operating expenses from gross rental income, and then determine the capitalization rate (cap rate) by dividing the NOI by the property value. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker in Quebec to accurately assess the financial viability of an investment property for a client. This involves not only understanding market dynamics, but also applying sound financial analysis techniques while adhering to the ethical obligations of diligence and competence, as outlined by the Organisme d'autoréglementation du Courtage Immobilier du Québec, OSIC. Miscalculating or misrepresenting the potential return on investment can lead to significant financial losses for the client and potential professional repercussions for the broker. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves calculating the net operating income (NOI) and then using it to determine the capitalization rate (cap rate). The NOI is derived by subtracting all operating expenses, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, management fees, etc. from the gross rental income. The cap rate is then calculated as \text cap rate equals \frac text net operating income text property value times 100%. This approach is correct because it provides a standardized metric for comparing the profitability of different income-generating properties, independent of financing. It directly addresses the property's ability to generate income relative to its price, which is a fundamental aspect of real estate investment analysis, and aligns with the OSIC expectation of brokers, providing accurate and relevant financial information to clients. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves solely focusing on the gross rental income without accounting for operating expenses. This fails to provide a realistic picture of the property's profitability, as it ignores the costs associated with maintaining and operating the property. This misrepresentation violates the broker's duty of diligence and competence, as it leads to an inflated perception of potential returns. Another incorrect approach is to calculate the return based only on the potential appreciation of the property value over a short period, ignoring the income-generating capacity. While appreciation is a component of total return, relying solely on it for an investment analysis is speculative and does not reflect the ongoing cash flow performance of the property, which is crucial for investment decisions. This approach neglects the fundamental principles of income property analysis and can mislead clients about the true investment potential. A further incorrect approach is to calculate a simple return based on the total purchase price and the first year's projected rental income, without deducting any expenses. This is essentially the gross rent multiplier (GRM) calculation applied incorrectly as a return metric. It is fundamentally flawed because it does not account for the actual cost of ownership, leading to an overestimation of profitability and a failure to meet the professional standard of providing a comprehensive financial assessment. Professional reasoning. Professionals should always prioritize a thorough and accurate financial analysis that reflects the true economic performance of an investment property. This involves a systematic approach that accounts for all relevant income and expenses to derive key performance indicators like the cap rate. When faced with investment analysis scenarios, brokers should follow established financial methodologies, ensure transparency in their calculations, and be prepared to explain the assumptions and limitations of their analysis to the client. This diligent and competent approach safeguards the client's interests and upholds the professional standards mandated by the OSIC. Question 11. The evaluation methodology shows that a real estate broker in Quebec, acting as a property manager for a client's rental property, receives a complaint from a tenant regarding a persistent leak in the bathroom ceiling that is causing damage. The owner is hesitant to authorize immediate repairs, citing the cost and suggesting the tenant might be able to manage with temporary solutions until the lease renewal. What is the most appropriate course of action for the broker to take? Option A. Inform the owner of their legal obligation under the Civil Code of Quebec to ensure the property is habitable and address essential repairs promptly. Then proceed with arranging the necessary repairs in accordance with the lease and applicable laws. Option B. Advise the tenant that they are responsible for finding a temporary solution to the leak and that the owner will address it at the end of the lease term. Option C. Arrange for the essential repairs to be completed and bill the owner, without explicitly detailing the owner's legal obligation to perform such repairs, assuming the owner will understand the necessity. Option D. Suggest to the owner that they ask the tenant to pay for the essential repairs directly, as the tenant is the one experiencing the inconvenience. The correct answer is A. Inform the owner of their legal obligation under the Civil Code of Quebec to ensure the property is habitable and address essential repairs promptly. Then proceed with arranging the necessary repairs in accordance with the lease and applicable laws. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that managing a rental property in Quebec requires strict adherence to the Civil Code of Quebec and specific regulations governing landlord-tenant relationships and property management practices. This scenario is professionally challenging because it involves balancing the property owner's desire for cost savings with the legal obligations and ethical responsibilities of a real estate broker acting as a property manager. A broker must ensure that all actions taken are compliant with Quebec law, protect the interests of both the owner and the tenant, and maintain professional integrity. The best approach involves the broker proactively informing the owner of their legal obligations regarding essential repairs and maintenance, and then proceeding with the necessary work in accordance with the lease agreement and Quebec law. This approach is correct because it prioritizes regulatory compliance and tenant well-being. The broker's duty of care extends to ensuring the property is maintained in a habitable condition, as mandated by the Civil Code of Quebec. By informing the owner of their responsibilities and acting to rectify the situation, the broker upholds their professional obligations and mitigates potential legal disputes or penalties. This demonstrates a commitment to ethical practice and sound property management. Proceeding with the repairs without explicitly informing the owner about their legal obligation to do so, while still charging the owner for the work, is an incorrect approach. This fails to uphold the broker's duty to advise the owner fully on their legal responsibilities and could be perceived as circumventing the owner's decision-making authority regarding necessary expenditures, even if the repairs are legally required. Suggesting the tenant cover the cost of the essential repairs directly, even if the owner is hesitant, is an incorrect approach. This shifts the legal responsibility for maintaining the property from the owner to the tenant, which is a direct violation of the owner's obligations under the Civil Code of Quebec, and could lead to significant legal repercussions for both the owner and the broker. Ignoring the tenant's request for essential repairs and advising the owner to wait until the lease is up for renewal is an incorrect approach. This demonstrates a failure to act in good faith and a disregard for the tenant's right to a safe and habitable living environment, as guaranteed by Quebec law. Such an action can result in legal action by the tenant against the owner and damage the broker's professional reputation. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that prioritizes understanding and adhering to all applicable laws and regulations first. This involves clearly identifying the legal obligations of all parties involved. Second, they should assess the ethical implications of each potential action, considering their fiduciary duties to the client and their broader responsibilities to tenants and the public. Third, they should communicate transparently and proactively with all parties, providing clear advice based on legal and ethical considerations. Finally, they should document all communications and actions taken to ensure accountability and provide a record of compliance. Question 12. The audit findings indicate that a real estate broker in Quebec, when assisting a client with a mortgage application, accepted the client's verbal confirmation of income and property value without requesting or reviewing supporting documentation from the client or third-party sources. Which of the following actions best demonstrates adherence to Quebec's regulatory framework for loan underwriting and approval? Option A. The broker obtains and meticulously reviews all necessary supporting documentation, including proof of income, credit reports, and property appraisals, to ensure the accuracy of the information submitted to the lender. Option B. The broker proceeds with the loan application based on the client's verbal assurances, assuming the client is being truthful about their financial situation and the property's worth. Option C. The broker advises the client to slightly inflate their reported income on the application to increase their chances of loan approval. Option D. The broker submits the loan application with a note to the lender indicating that some financial details are based on the client's verbal statements and may require further verification. Correct answer is A. The broker obtains and meticulously reviews all necessary supporting documentation, including proof of income, credit reports, and property appraisals, to ensure the accuracy of the information submitted to the lender. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a broker to balance the client's immediate desire for a loan with the stringent regulatory requirements for loan underwriting and approval in Quebec. The broker must act in the client's best interest while adhering to the ethical obligations and legal framework governing real estate transactions in the province. Misinterpreting or circumventing these requirements can lead to serious consequences, including disciplinary action, financial penalties, and damage to reputation. The best approach involves diligently verifying all financial information provided by the client and ensuring that the loan application accurately reflects the client's financial capacity and the property's value, as mandated by Quebec's real estate brokerage regulations and lending institution guidelines. This includes obtaining all necessary supporting documentation, such as proof of income, credit reports, and property appraisals, and submitting a complete and truthful application to the lender. This meticulous process ensures compliance with the duty of care owed to the client and the regulatory framework, promoting transparency and preventing fraudulent or unsuitable lending. An incorrect approach would be to accept the client's self-reported income without independent verification. This fails to meet the broker's obligation to ensure the accuracy of information presented to the lender and exposes both the client and the lender to risk. Quebec's real estate regulations emphasize due diligence and the prevention of misrepresentation. Another incorrect approach is to pressure the lender to expedite the approval process by downplaying potential financial risks or omitting pertinent details. This constitutes a breach of ethical conduct and potentially violates regulations against misleading lenders. The broker's role is to facilitate a compliant and transparent transaction, not to manipulate the process. Finally, advising the client to provide falsified documentation, such as inflated pay stubs or altered bank statements, is a severe ethical and legal violation. This constitutes fraud and directly contravenes the integrity expected of licensed real estate professionals in Quebec. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that prioritizes regulatory compliance and ethical conduct. This involves thoroughly understanding the loan underwriting process, the specific requirements of lenders, and the legal obligations under Quebec's real estate laws. When faced with client requests that seem to bypass due diligence, brokers must firmly but professionally explain the regulatory boundaries and ethical imperatives, guiding the client towards a compliant and sustainable loan solution. Question 13. The risk matrix shows a seller in Quebec is experiencing significant personal financial pressure and is anxious to sell their property quickly. They have expressed a strong desire to list the property at a price below the initial comparative market analysis, CMA, provided by their real estate broker, believing this will expedite the sale. What is the most ethically and professionally sound approach for the broker to take in this situation? Option A. Advise the seller to undertake extensive and costly renovations before listing, without a clear understanding of how these renovations align with the property's market value and the CMA. Option B. List the property at a price significantly higher than the CMA, hoping for an opportunistic buyer, and assure the seller that this strategy will eventually lead to a sale. Option C. Immediately agree to list the property at the lower price suggested by the seller, prioritizing their expressed desire for a quick sale over the CMA's valuation. Option D. Present the CMA findings clearly to the seller, explain how it supports a realistic listing price, and discuss strategies to attract buyers while managing their expectations regarding the sale timeline and price, ensuring the seller makes an informed decision. The correct answer is D. Present the CMA findings clearly to the seller, explain how it supports a realistic listing price, and discuss strategies to attract buyers while managing their expectations regarding the sale timeline and price, ensuring the seller makes an informed decision. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker in Quebec to balance the immediate financial interests of a seller with their overarching ethical and legal obligations to ensure a fair and transparent transaction. The broker must navigate potential conflicts of interest and uphold the integrity of the real estate market as defined by Quebec's professional regulations. The best professional approach involves prioritizing the seller's informed consent and understanding of the property's true market value, as determined by a comprehensive evaluation. This means clearly communicating the findings of the comparative market analysis, CMA, and explaining how it informs a realistic listing price. This approach aligns with the ethical duties of a broker under Quebec's professional code and the Real Estate Brokerage Act, Loi sur le courtage immobilier, which mandate acting with diligence, honesty, and integrity, and ensuring clients are fully informed to make sound decisions. Broker's role is to facilitate a transaction based on accurate information, not to manipulate pricing for a quicker sale at the expense of the seller's potential gain. An incorrect approach would be to immediately lower the listing price significantly based solely on the seller's anxiety and desire for a quick sale, without adequately presenting the CMA findings. This fails to uphold the broker's duty to obtain the best possible price for the seller within legal and ethical bounds. It could be seen as a failure to exercise due diligence and could potentially lead to a complaint for misrepresentation or breach of fiduciary duty. Another incorrect approach would be to agree to list the property at a price significantly above the CMA without any justification, hoping for a lucky buyer, while seemingly catering to the seller's initial wish. This is professionally irresponsible. It sets unrealistic expectations, wastes the seller's time and money on a prolonged listing period, and ultimately harms the seller's position in the market by potentially creating a perception of overpricing. This deviates from the broker's obligation to provide expert advice and facilitate a realistic transaction. A further incorrect approach would be to suggest the seller undertake minor cosmetic upgrades without a thorough understanding of their return on investment relative to the property's current market value and the CMA. While renovations can sometimes increase value, doing so without a strategic plan informed by market data can be a poor use of the seller's resources and does not address the core issue of setting an appropriate initial listing price based on the property's current condition and market comparables. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the client's objectives, followed by a thorough assessment of the property and market conditions using tools like a CMA. This information should then be clearly communicated to the client, outlining realistic expectations and strategic options. Ethical considerations and regulatory requirements, such as those in Quebec's real estate brokerage laws, must guide every step. Ensuring transparency, informed consent, and the client's best interests are paramount. Question 14. Operational review demonstrates that a seller in Quebec is seeking to list their property and has expressed a desire for the broadest possible market exposure, while also wanting to ensure the property is actively marketed by their chosen brokerage. They are comfortable with the idea of paying a commission if the sale is successful, regardless of who finds the buyer. Which listing agreement approach best aligns with these stated objectives and Quebec's real estate brokerage regulations? Option A. An open listing agreement, where the seller can list with multiple brokers and owes a commission only to the broker who procures the buyer, or if the seller finds the buyer themselves. Option B. An exclusive right to sell listing agreement, where the broker earns a commission if the property is sold during the listing term by any party, including the seller. Option C. A net listing agreement, where the seller agrees to accept a minimum net amount for their property, and the broker's commission is any amount received above that minimum. Option D. An exclusive agency listing agreement, where the seller can sell the property themselves without owing a commission, but the broker earns a commission if another broker sells it. The correct answer is B. An exclusive right to sell listing agreement, where the broker earns a commission if the property is sold during the listing term by any party, including the seller. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the broker to balance the seller's desire for maximum exposure with the legal and ethical obligations tied to different listing agreement types. Misunderstanding or misrepresenting the implications of each agreement can lead to contractual disputes, financial losses for the seller, and potential disciplinary action against the broker under Quebec's real estate laws. Careful judgment is required to ensure the chosen agreement aligns with the seller's objectives and the broker's fiduciary duties. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves clearly explaining the distinctions between an exclusive right to sell, an exclusive agency, and an open listing agreement to the seller. This includes detailing the broker's commission entitlement under each scenario and the seller's obligations. For a seller who wants the widest possible exposure and is willing to pay a commission regardless of who procures the buyer, an exclusive right to sell agreement is the most appropriate. This agreement guarantees the broker a commission if the property sells during the listing period, incentivizing the broker to invest maximum effort and resources into marketing and selling the property. This aligns with the broker's duty to act in the seller's best interest by maximizing the chances of a sale and securing the best possible price, as mandated by the Quebec Professional Association of Real Estate Brokers, OSIC, regulations concerning brokerage contracts. Incorrect approaches analysis. Presenting only an exclusive right to sell agreement without fully explaining the seller's commitment to pay a commission, even if they find the buyer themselves, is misleading. This fails to inform the seller of their potential financial obligations and limits their understanding of alternative listing structures, potentially violating the OSIC rules on transparency and fair dealing. offering only an exclusive agency agreement without clarifying that the seller retains the right to sell the property themselves without owing a commission, but still owes a commission if another broker sells it, is incomplete. This misrepresents the broker's guaranteed commission and the seller's rights, potentially leading to disputes and contravening the OSIC requirements for clear contractual terms. Suggesting only an open listing agreement without explaining that the seller can list with multiple brokers and only owes a commission to the broker who successfully procures a buyer, or if the seller finds the buyer themselves, is also problematic. While this offers maximum flexibility to the seller, it significantly reduces the broker's incentive to invest heavily in marketing, as their commission is not guaranteed. Presenting this as the primary or only option without discussing the seller's goals for exposure, and the broker's commitment could be seen as a failure to adequately advise the seller on strategies that best meet their needs. Professional reasoning. Professionals should always begin by understanding the client's specific goals and risk tolerance. This involves active listening and asking probing questions about their desired level of exposure, their willingness to pay a commission under different circumstances, and their comfort with various marketing strategies. Following this needs assessment, the professional should then present a range of suitable options, clearly articulating the advantages, disadvantages, and legal/financial implications of each. Transparency and comprehensive disclosure are paramount, ensuring the client can make an informed decision that aligns with their objectives and complies with all relevant regulations, such as those set forth by the OSIC. Question 15. The risk matrix shows a potential client in Quebec is interested in diversifying their portfolio by investing in a real estate investment trust REIT. As a licensed real estate broker in Quebec, how should you professionally respond to this client's inquiry regarding the REIT? Option A. Provide the client with detailed analysis of the REIT performance, potential returns, and tax implications, highlighting its advantages as a real estate investment. Option B. Explain that while REIT are linked to real estate, they are considered securities, and advise the client to consult with a registered securities dealer or financial advisor in Quebec for guidance on purchasing units. Option C. Recommend the REIT as a secure and stable way to invest in real estate, suggesting they can purchase units through your brokerage firm if they are interested. Option D. Offer to facilitate the purchase of REIT units for the client, as your firm has experience with various real estate-related financial products. The correct answer is B. Explain that while REIT are linked to real estate, they are considered securities, and advise the client to consult with a registered securities dealer or financial advisor in Quebec for guidance on purchasing units. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the real estate broker to navigate the complexities of advising a client on an investment vehicle that, while related to real estate, is fundamentally a security. The broker must understand the limitations of their license and the regulatory boundaries between real estate brokerage and investment advisory services in Quebec. Misinterpreting these boundaries can lead to serious regulatory breaches, client harm, and professional repercussions. Careful judgment is required to ensure the advice provided is within the scope of the broker's expertise and licensing, and that the client receives appropriate guidance from qualified professionals. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves clearly identifying the nature of the investment and directing the client to the appropriate licensed professional. In this case, a real estate investment trust REIT is a security, not a direct real estate transaction. Therefore, the broker should explain to the client that while REIT are linked to real estate, their purchase and sale fall under securities regulations. The broker must then advise the client to consult with a registered securities dealer or financial advisor in Quebec, who is licensed to provide advice on such investments. This approach adheres to the professional obligations under the Quebec Real Estate Brokerage Act, Loi sur le courtage immobilier du Québec, and its associated regulations, which govern real estate transactions, and respects the jurisdiction of the Autorité des Marchés Financiers, AMF, over securities. It ensures the client receives advice from a professional qualified to discuss investment risks and suitability of securities. Incorrect approach is analysis. Advising the client on the specific merits and risks of purchasing units in a particular REIT, including potential returns and tax implications, is an incorrect approach. This constitutes providing investment advice on a security, which is outside the scope of a Quebec real estate broker's license and regulatory authority. Such actions would violate the Quebec Real Estate Brokerage Act by engaging in activities reserved for licensed securities professionals and could lead to penalties from the AMF. Recommending the rate as a safe and stable, real estate-related investment without proper licensing is also an incorrect approach. This involves making a judgment about the investment's suitability and risk profile, which is the domain of a securities advisor. The broker is not authorized to assess the financial suitability or risk tolerance of a client for securities. This misrepresentation of the investment's nature and the broker's authority could lead to significant liability and regulatory sanctions. Suggesting that the client purchase units directly through the broker's brokerage firm, assuming the firm is licensed for real estate but not securities, is a fundamentally incorrect and potentially fraudulent approach. This blurs the lines between real estate brokerage and securities dealing without the necessary licensing and regulatory oversight for securities transactions. It exposes both the client and the broker to severe legal and regulatory consequences, including operating without a license for securities transaction. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Quebec must operate strictly within the boundaries of their licensing and regulatory mandates. When faced with a situation that touches upon areas outside their expertise or licensing, the paramount professional duty is to identify this boundary and refer the client to the appropriate licensed professional. This involves understanding the distinction between real estate transactions, which fall under the purview of the Organisme d'autoréglementation du cordage immobilier du Québec OSIC, and securities transactions, which are regulated by the AMF. A robust decision-making process includes 1. Accurately identifying the nature of the product or service being discussed. Is it real estate or a security? 2. Assessing whether one's license and expertise cover this area. 3. If not, clearly communicating this limitation to the client. And 4. Providing a referral to a qualified and licensed professional in the relevant field. Question 16. The risk matrix shows a potential conflict of interest when a real estate broker in Quebec acts as a representative for both the buyer and the seller in the same transaction. Considering the commission structure, which of the following represents the most ethically sound and regulatorily compliant approach for the broker? Option A. Fully disclose the dual representation to both the buyer and the seller. Obtain their informed written consent to act for both parties, and clearly outline the agreed-upon commission-sharing arrangement in writing before proceeding with the transaction. Option B. Inform the seller of the buyer's willingness to pay a higher commission if the broker prioritizes their offer, and negotiate a personal bonus with the buyer for facilitating a quick sale, without explicit written disclosure to both parties. Option C. Proceed with the transaction, assuming that standard commission split between the buyers and sellers' brokers is implicitly understood and acceptable to both parties, and address commission details only at the final closing. Option D. Accept a commission from the seller only, and inform the buyer that their representation is complimentary, without detailing any potential implications for the buyer's negotiation position or the broker's fiduciary duty. The correct answer is A. Fully disclose the dual representation to both the buyer and the seller, obtain their informed written consent to act for both parties, and clearly outline the agreed-upon commission-sharing arrangement in writing before proceeding with the transaction. Explanation. The risk matrix shows that a potential conflict of interest exists when a broker represents both the buyer and the seller in a transaction, particularly concerning commission structures. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires absolute transparency and adherence to Quebec-specific real estate brokerage regulations to maintain client trust and avoid ethical breaches. The broker must navigate the dual agency situation with utmost care, ensuring that their compensation does not create an incentive to favor one party over the other. The best professional approach involves clearly disclosing the dual representation to both parties at the outset and obtaining their informed written consent. This consent must explicitly detail how the commission will be shared or allocated between the parties, ensuring that neither party is disadvantaged. Quebec's Civil Code of Quebec and the regulations governing real estate brokers mandate this level of transparency and consent to prevent conflicts of interest and ensure fair dealings. This approach upholds the broker's fiduciary duties to both clients by prioritizing their interests and ensuring they understand the implications of the broker's dual role and compensation. An approach that fails to obtain explicit written consent for dual representation and the specific commission arrangement is ethically and regulatorily flawed. It violates the principle of informed consent and creates an environment where one party might unknowingly be receiving less favorable terms due to the broker's divided loyalties. Another unacceptable approach is to unilaterally decide on commission allocation without prior discussion and agreement from both parties. This bypasses the essential step of client consultation and consent, potentially leading to disputes and accusations of unfair practice. Furthermore, any commission structure that is not fully disclosed and agreed upon in writing before the transaction is finalized is a direct contravention of the regulatory framework, designed to protect consumers and maintain the integrity of the real estate profession in Quebec. Professionals should employ a decision-making process that begins with identifying potential conflicts of interest inherent in any transaction. This should be followed by a thorough review of the applicable Quebec real estate laws and ethical guidelines. The next step is to proactively communicate any identified conflicts to all parties involved, seeking their explicit, informed, and written consent. The terms of engagement, including commission structures, must be clearly articulated and agreed upon by all parties before proceeding. If at any point the broker feels unable to represent both parties fairly, or if consent cannot be obtained, they must decline dual representation. Question 17. System analysis indicates that a real estate broker in Quebec is representing a client in the sale of their residential property. The broker learns that a vacant adjacent property, owned by a third party, is about to be listed for sale at a significantly undervalued price. The broker believes that acquiring this adjacent property themselves, or through an associate, could significantly enhance the value of their client's property in the future. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible course of action for the broker to take in this situation? Option A. Advise the client to lower their asking price to expedite the sale, while secretly planning to leverage the knowledge of the undervalued adjacent property for personal gain after the client's transaction closes. Option B. Inform the client verbally about the adjacent property's upcoming listing and their interest, but proceed with the sale without written documentation, assuming the client understands. Option C. Immediately disclose in writing to their client their knowledge of the adjacent property's upcoming listing and their personal interest in potentially acquiring it, explaining how it might impact their client's sale and offering the client the option to proceed or seek alternative representation. Option D. Proceed with the sale of the client's property, advising the client to accept the current offer, and then discreetly attempt to purchase the adjacent property themselves after the client's sale is finalized. The correct answer is C. Immediately disclose in writing to their client their knowledge of the adjacent property's upcoming listing and their personal interest in potentially acquiring it, explaining how it might impact their client's sale, and offering the client the option to proceed or seek alternative representation. Explanation. System analysis indicates that this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a broker's duty to their client and the potential for personal gain, which could compromise their fiduciary obligations. The broker must navigate this situation with utmost integrity, ensuring transparency and prioritizing the client's best interests above all else. Careful judgment is required to uphold the ethical standards mandated by the Quebec professional real estate regulations. The correct approach involves immediately disclosing the potential conflict of interest to the client in writing. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the principles of transparency and good faith required of real estate brokers in Quebec. Article 36 of the Quebec Professional Code mandates that a professional must inform their client of any situation that could compromise their professional judgment or lead to a conflict of interest. By providing a written disclosure, the broker creates a clear record of their actions and allows the client to make an informed decision about whether to proceed with the transaction or seek alternative representation. This proactive disclosure upholds the broker's fiduciary duty and maintains client trust. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with the transaction without informing the client about the personal interest in the adjacent property. This failure constitutes a breach of the broker's duty of loyalty and good faith, as it prioritizes personal gain over the client's potential advantage. Such an action could be seen as a violation of Article 36 of the Quebec Professional Code and the general ethical obligations of a broker to act in the best interest of their client. Another incorrect approach would be to inform the client verbally, but not in writing, While verbal disclosure is a step towards transparency, it lacks the formal documentation that is crucial for accountability and proof of informed consent. In Quebec's regulatory environment, written communication is often preferred for significant matters to avoid misunderstandings and provide a clear record, aligning with the spirit of due diligence expected of professionals. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to advise the client to offer a lower price based on the broker's personal knowledge of the adjacent property's potential value, without disclosing the personal interest. This misrepresents the broker's role as an impartial advisor and exploits the client's trust for personal benefit, directly contravening the ethical obligation to act with integrity and avoid situations that could impair professional judgment. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a clear identification of any potential conflicts of interest, followed by an immediate and transparent disclosure to the client in writing. If the conflict cannot be resolved or waived by the client, the broker must consider withdrawing from the transaction to avoid any appearance of impropriety and to ensure the client's interests are fully protected. Question 18. The monitoring system demonstrates that a client in Quebec is proceeding with a mortgage application that requires private mortgage insurance, PMI. As their real estate broker, what is the most professional and ethically sound course of action to ensure the client fully understands this requirement? Option A. Engage in a detailed discussion with the client about the purpose of private mortgage insurance, its role as a lender requirement for higher loan-to-value ratios, the associated costs, and confirm they have received and understood the relevant documentation from the lender or insurer. Option B. Provide the client with the lender's standard PMI disclosure form and assume they will read and understand it without further explanation. Option C. Inform the client that private mortgage insurance is a standard fee included in most mortgage transactions and move forward with the application process. Option D. Advise the client that the brokerage can help them find the most competitive private mortgage insurance rates, implying a direct role in selecting the insurer. The correct answer is A. Engage in a detailed discussion with the client about the purpose of private mortgage insurance, its role as a lender requirement for higher loan-to-value ratios, the associated costs, and confirm they have received and understood the relevant documentation from the lender or insurer. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a real estate broker in Quebec because it involves navigating the complexities of private mortgage insurance, PMI, in the context of a client's specific financial situation and the broker's duty of care. The broker must ensure the client understands the implications of PMI, its role in securing financing, and the potential alternatives, all while adhering to Quebec's real estate regulations and ethical obligations. Misinformation, or a lack of transparency regarding PMI, can lead to significant financial repercussions for the client and professional liability for the broker. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a comprehensive discussion with the client about the necessity of private mortgage insurance for their specific mortgage application, explaining its purpose in mitigating lender risk and enabling higher loan-to-value ratios. This approach requires the broker to clearly articulate that PMI is a requirement from the lender, not a product offered by the brokerage, and to ensure the client understands the associated costs and how they are factored into the mortgage payments. Furthermore, the broker should confirm the client has received and understood the official PMI documentation from the lender or insurer, and that they have had an opportunity to ask questions. This aligns with the ethical obligation to act in the client's best interest, provide clear and accurate information, and ensure informed consent, as mandated by professional real estate practice guidelines in Quebec. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves simply stating that private mortgage insurance is a standard part of the mortgage process, without detailing its specific function or implications for the client's financial obligations. This fails to meet the duty of providing clear and understandable information, potentially leaving the client unaware of the true nature and cost of PMI. Another incorrect approach is to imply that the brokerage is involved in selecting or recommending a specific private mortgage insurer, or that the brokerage benefits directly from the PMI. This is misleading, as PMI is typically arranged by the lender, and the broker's role is informational and facilitative, not advisory on the insurance product itself. This could create a conflict of interest or misrepresent the broker's professional capacity. A further incorrect approach is to overlook the client's understanding of the PMI documentation, assuming that because it was provided, the client comprehends its significance. Professional responsibility requires active verification of understanding, especially for complex financial instruments like PMI, to ensure the client is making truly informed decisions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a client-centric approach, prioritizing clear communication and education. When dealing with financial products like private mortgage insurance, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the client's needs and the role of PMI in meeting those needs, e.g., enabling financing. 2. Clearly explaining the nature of PMI as a lender requirement and its cost implications. 3. Verifying the client's comprehension of the provided documentation and offering further clarification. 4. Maintaining transparency about the broker's role and avoiding any misrepresentation of services or products. Question 19. Benchmark analysis indicates a client in Quebec has expressed interest in exploring financing options similar to FHA, VA, or USDA loans, believing these programs offer advantageous terms for homebuyers. As a licensed real estate broker in Quebec, how should you best address this client's financing inquiry? Options. A. Explain that FHA, VA, and USDA loans are specific to the United States federal government and do not apply in Quebec. Then proactively discuss available Quebec provincial and Canadian federal programs that may offer similar benefits, such as down payment assistance or mortgage guarantees. B. Detail how FHA, VA, and USDA loans function, suggesting the client might be able to navigate these programs if they meet certain criteria, even though they are U.S.-based. C. Advise the client that since these specific loan programs are not available in Quebec, their financing options are limited to conventional mortgages. D. Recommend that the client research and apply for FHA, VA, or USDA loans directly through U.S. lenders, as they may be able to access these programs as a Canadian resident. Option A. Detail how FHA, VA, and USDA loans function, suggesting the client might be able to navigate these programs if they meet certain criteria, even though they are U.S.-based. Option B. Advise the client that since these specific loan programs are not available in Quebec, their financing options are limited to conventional mortgages. Option C. Recommend that the client research and apply for FHA, VA, or USDA loans directly through U.S. lenders, as they may be able to access these programs as a Canadian resident. Option D. Explain that FHA, VA, and USDA loans are specific to the United States federal government and do not apply in Quebec. Then proactively discuss available Quebec provincial and Canadian federal programs that may offer similar benefits, such as down payment assistance or mortgage guarantees. The correct answer is D. Explain that FHA, VA, and USDA loans are specific to the United States federal government and do not apply in Quebec. Then proactively discuss available Quebec provincial and Canadian federal programs that may offer similar benefits, such as down payment assistance or mortgage guarantees. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker in Quebec to navigate the complexities of government-backed loan programs, specifically the FHA, VA, and USDA loans, which are not directly applicable in the Canadian context. The challenge lies in understanding the client's underlying need for financing assistance and guiding them towards appropriate Quebec-specific solutions without misrepresenting foreign programs. Misinformation or an attempt to apply non-existent programs could lead to significant client dissatisfaction, potential legal repercussions, and damage to the broker's professional reputation. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between general financing needs and specific, jurisdiction-bound loan products. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves acknowledging the client's interest in government-backed loan concepts while clarifying that FHA, VA, and USDA loans are United States federal programs and do not exist in Quebec. The broker should then pivot to discussing available Quebec provincial and Canadian federal programs that offer similar benefits, such as down payment assistance, low-interest loans, or guarantees for first-time homebuyers or specific demographic groups. This approach is correct because it prioritizes accurate information, client education, and adherence to the regulatory framework governing real estate transactions in Quebec. It demonstrates professional integrity by not misleading the client and by actively seeking relevant local solutions. The broker's duty of care and professional conduct mandates providing truthful and applicable advice. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves attempting to explain how FHA, VA, or USDA loans might work in Quebec, even hypothetically. This is professionally unacceptable because it creates a false impression and misleads the client about the availability of these specific programs. It violates the principle of providing accurate and truthful information, which is a cornerstone of ethical real estate practice in Quebec. Another incorrect approach is to dismiss the client's inquiry outright without offering any alternative solutions. While the specific programs mentioned are not applicable, the client's underlying need for accessible financing assistance remains. Ignoring this need and failing to explore relevant Quebec-based alternatives demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to act in the client's best interest, potentially violating the broker's fiduciary duties. A further incorrect approach is to suggest that the client pursue these U.S. programs independently, implying they might be accessible to Quebec residents. This is irresponsible and potentially harmful, as it could lead the client to waste time and resources on a path that is not viable, without providing any concrete assistance or guidance within the Quebec real estate market. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a client-centric approach that begins with active listening to understand the client's core needs and concerns. When faced with inquiries about programs specific to other jurisdictions, professionals' first step should be to clarify the applicability of those programs within the relevant jurisdiction. If they are not applicable, the professional must then leverage their knowledge of local and national programs to identify and explain relevant alternatives that can meet the client's objectives. This process requires continuous learning and a commitment to providing accurate, actionable advice that aligns with the regulatory and legal landscape of Quebec. Question 20. Process analysis reveals that a real estate broker in Quebec has just received the monthly bank statement for their client trust account. The statement shows a closing balance of $150,000. The brokerage's internal trust ledger indicates that at the end of the same month, the total amount owed to clients for various transactions is $152,500. The broker is preparing to file their quarterly trust account report with the Chambre Immobilière du Québec SIC. What is the most appropriate immediate action for the broker to take regarding the trust account and the upcoming report? Option A. Delay the reconciliation until the next monthly bank statement arrives to see if the discrepancy resolves itself. Option B. Proceed with filing the quarterly trust account report using the bank statement balance of $150,000, as this is the official figure from the bank. Option C. Immediately reconcile the trust account by comparing the bank statement balance with the total client liabilities in the trust ledger and investigate any difference. Option D. Inform the CIQ of the discrepancy in the quarterly report without attempting to reconcile the account first. The correct answer is C. Immediately reconcile the trust account by comparing the bank statement balance with the total client liabilities in the trust ledger and investigate any difference. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for real estate brokers in Quebec, accurately accounting for and reporting client funds held in trust. The professional challenge lies in ensuring strict adherence to the Chambre Immobilière du Québec SIC regulations regarding trust accounts, which are designed to protect consumers. Mismanagement can lead to serious ethical breaches, financial penalties, and damage to the broker's reputation and license. The broker must demonstrate meticulous record-keeping and timely, accurate reporting to maintain client trust and regulatory compliance. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves immediately reconciling the trust account with the brokerage's internal records upon receiving the bank statement. This reconciliation process, as mandated by CIQ regulations, ensures that all deposits and withdrawals are accurately reflected and that the balance in the trust account matches the brokerage ledger. Specifically, the broker must compare the bank statement's closing balance with the sum of all outstanding trust liabilities, funds owed to clients. This proactive approach allows for the immediate identification and correction of any discrepancies, preventing potential issues from escalating and ensuring that the trust account balance is always accurate and verifiable. This aligns with the CIQ's emphasis on transparency and the protection of client funds. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to delay the reconciliation until the end of the fiscal year. This failure to perform regular reconciliations, typically monthly as implied by the receipt of bank statements, violates the CIQ's requirement for diligent oversight of trust accounts. Such delays increase the risk of undetected errors or misappropriation of funds, leaving clients vulnerable and potentially leading to significant financial and legal repercussions for the broker. Another incorrect approach is to only reconcile the trust account when a client requests a statement or when an audit is scheduled. This reactive stance is insufficient for maintaining proper financial management and regulatory compliance. The CIQ expects brokers to have robust internal controls and ongoing monitoring of trust accounts, not just to respond to specific events. Waiting for a request or audit means that potential problems may have persisted for an extended period, undermining the integrity of the trust account and the broker's fiduciary duty. A further incorrect approach is to rely solely on the bank statement without cross-referencing it with the brokerage's internal trust ledger. The bank statement provides an external view of the account, but the internal ledger details the specific transactions and client allocations. Without this cross-referencing, it is impossible to verify that funds are correctly attributed to individual clients, or to identify any discrepancies between what the bank reports and what the brokerage records indicate. This oversight directly contravenes the principles of accurate record-keeping and client fund management required by the CIQ. Professional reasoning. Professionals in Quebec's real estate sector must adopt a proactive and systematic approach to financial management, particularly concerning trust accounts. The decision-making process should prioritize immediate verification and reconciliation of financial records upon receipt of bank statements. This involves establishing a routine for comparing external bank statements with internal ledgers, identifying and resolving any discrepancies promptly, and maintaining comprehensive documentation of all trust-related transactions. Adherence to CIQ regulations is not merely a procedural requirement, but a fundamental ethical obligation to protect client assets and maintain public trust in the profession.